All right. Bill, Ryan, welcome back. Seems like you hadn't been here for
Seems like nearly a week.
a week or so.
As I was telling your colleagues that since I saw you last, we've been down in Tuscaloosa talking to Crimson Tide folks and starting that search down there. Glad to be back here. I know you've had an endurance testing day today with three candidates. Hopefully the experience so has been a good experience for you and that you've met some good candidates. Normally what we do at this point is we ask you, first of all, to, you know how to do this now, to do the matrix on just the five candidates, and they're in the order now that you saw them. And so Ryan's going to give you a copy of this if that's okay. Would you like to proceed with that? It's not going to be the decision maker. It's going to be the starting point for your discussion of these candidates and see where you are. You also, I think, have on your agenda that you could possibly do a straw poll tonight to see where you are. Is that?
Yes, and I will explain that a little bit further.
Sure.
This is not a voting session. However, we are entitled to take straw polls for direction. So after we go through this forced matrix, if there was one candidate that stood out clearly from this, and the board's opinion was that that's the person we think would be the best fit, by show of hands, which isn't a binding vote, it's simply a straw poll, you could direct me as the chairman to work with Ray and Associates to develop a contract, and then that contract actually would come back during a voting session for the board to review and vote on. That's when we would actually make the decision of whether to hire that person or not hire that person. If, however, we go through this matrix and the board said, you know, I'm still just having a tough time deciding between two of them or three of them, by show of hands, again, a non-binding vote, but we could bring two or three back for additional interviews if we chose to do that. So let's work through the matrix itself, and then we'll deal with that when we get through it. Mr. Wise, do you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do. If we take a straw vote with a show of hands,
Poll.
straw poll, whatever you want to call it, and there are 8 hands showing favoring candidate A, then is it the mindset of the executive committee or the search firm that is the name that fills in the blanks on the contract? That's a question.
Good question as usual. And actually, we will work at the direction of the board. And I think if you come up with somebody that clear is a super majority as you talked about, then that would be the direction that we would go on your direction. I mean, it's our job to go after whomever you tell us. I mean, are you going to, in a straw poll, get an 11-0 vote?
No.
My guess is that'd be difficult, you know.
Well, let me,
So,
and I'm sorry to interrupt you.
no, you're
I
not,
apologize
really.
for that, but personally, and that's all I can speak for is me, I won't participate in a straw poll tonight, because I'm not ready to decide between any of the 5. And I've said it in board meetings time on top of time. I won't support anything I've not had time to investigate. Quite frankly, I'll do the matrix. I don't have a problem with that. I won't participate, Mr. Chairman, or anybody else, in a straw poll because I want to rest. I want to pray about it, quite frankly, and that can get me in more trouble with ACLU. That's fine. I want to ask questions I want to do my due diligence because this is an astronomical task that we have before us. And that's my stance. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments? Mr. Duncan?
I'm not gonna vote tonight, and the reason why, because, I guess I'm sort of like him. This is a big task that we are asked to do. I've been in a situation like this where, and I'm a pastor, I've asked people not to, when you got 5 or 6 people coming, make a choice, don't get in a hurry to do that. Research those people, ask questions, study that, because that person is going to be leading you for a long time. So you need to take your time and do things like that. So I have a feeling that sometime when you have a person coming in that's going to take on this type of job and this kind of leadership job, and I guess from my experience, out of 52 years, I never made big decisions like this unless I went to the Lord and asked the Lord to give me some guidance. But y'all can do whatever you want to. But I just feel like that I need some guidance above what we got here.
All right, Mr. Hale?
Mr. Long, of course, I appreciate those. Looks like this particular process started on January 16th. It's the 21st of April. And I knew that, Ms. Don. I'm comfortable whatever the majority of the board decides, if we need to take a straw poll or if we want to hold off. We certainly need to move quickly now.
All right, thank you. Mr. Newman?
I understand what the two gentlemen have said, and I'm not one to rush to judgment either. It's your choice, and it's your decision. We don't vote. We just try to get you good candidates. Now, having said that, I want you to realize also that this is not a time where you can study about this for the next 2-3 weeks, because some of these candidates will not be available to you. And that's just a fact of life, is that if we tarry in the regard of any of these candidates, they're either likely to interpret that as the board's not, they're just warm, not hot for them, or that another thing that happens is that I know a couple of these candidates, well, more than 2, that are well loved in their home district, and the Rose Parade starts when, meaning that roses and dollars follow requests, please stay here, don't leave us. So they're serious. We've talked to all the candidates post-interview. They're all serious. They're all very interested in the position. I don't want to see that wane.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gregory, would you have something?
Well, yes, and I also listened to what he just said too. I really, my personal preference would be that, and it may not change anybody's mind, but that we did wait, because I do remember some, 15 years ago or so, the board made an emotional decision one night. Does everyone know who I'm talking about? You agree, Mr. Duncan? And they did it right after and I'm not sure, I think that we're all thinking well, at least my perception is. But I also realize what you said, we can't wait. My honest, if I could do everything the way I preferred to do, which I'm one of 11, I would like to see who does come out, probably 1, 2, maybe 1, 2, 3, according to how close that is. and have, is that a possibility that they come and we ask them questions that is on our mind rather than just, but then I do realize there's something that has to take place. I do realize that. But I sit here and I have about as many questions that I've come up with, obviously, that pertain to the school system.
I could address this question, Mr. Chair, if you
Go ahead.
would like me to. Here's what normally happens if, now, I've worked with boards coming away from this evening saying, it's 11 o'clock at night, but call this candidate, we want to see if he'll take the job or she'll take the job. And so we've done that. We don't push that. That's not our game at all. My thinking is, though, that we're going to have to be talking to these candidates and telling them where you are. Now, let's use the example that Mr. Gregory suggested, and you get it down to 2 candidates. Well, what do you do? I mean, there's not a hair's difference perhaps between them in your minds, and maybe the board, part of the board, you know, for one or the other. What we normally do for that return interview is that's an opportunity. You don't ask the same questions of each candidate at that point. You ask the questions that are pertinent to what you need to know from that candidate that you don't know yet and would help you in making a decision. They don't have to be a common question because now you've narrowed it to who you think the top 2 or 3, you know. But that's really up to you, and it's going to play out the way you tell us tonight.
What about the cost involved with bringing them back for an additional, interview like you talked about? I don't know in terms of where we would be at cost. I think generally the board is very pleased with the candidates that we had in today. I think we're generally, it sounds like, very excited about probably a top 2 or 1 or whoever that might be. My concern, though, is in looking at their profiles, several of these candidates are looking at other superintendent positions, and I definitely don't want to lose them. I know that I've talked with other search firms talking about the fact that that's when you do end up losing them. If you go through this process and then you kind of get toward the end, and then if you don't move through the process in a manner which is swift, then you're going to end up losing some of your top candidates, and I don't want to do that. So I guess what would be your advice in terms of
well,
how
you've hit the
quickly-
nail on the head. If they're a good candidate, they can be good somewhere else.
Absolutely, and I noticed that
Okay.
several of them are.
That's a critical factor. And I'm not suggesting, my comment was you can't take 2 or 3 weeks to get this done. You've got to identify who your top candidate is in the next few days, hopefully. If you can't do it tomorrow, we've got the whole weekend that they're going to stew over this and be talking to other people. I urge you to come together on it and do what you have to do, but let's don't, as I say, dally or tarry in the process. And if you need to bring them back, if you brought 2 candidates back at your expense, you also have the spouses come in, you do some different things. But that's a time for you to ask a different set of questions for each of them, if indeed that's your pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, may I? What I have in my mind, and I want to get your suggestion, will this normally work? I think I can be prepared personally to vote this coming Monday night on the one candidate that I feel like I like the best. Now, I do like Mr. Gregory's suggestion of doing the matrix so that we have a general idea of and I'm not saying that my thought is right. I don't know what's right now, but I think I can have figured out for me personally what's right by Monday night, and that's kind of my thinking, is that we get back together Monday night to decide to bring 2 back or decide on selecting 1. I would be fine with that.
board, I can tell you, if we don't come to a consensus tonight, we'll be back here Saturday morning. I just feel that importantly, I've watched executive searches before, and I think Mr. Newman characterized it pretty well. These guys are going back to their home districts tomorrow, and I can assure you, all of them are aware, their home districts are aware they were here tonight, and today, and they're gonna start hitting on them. I've seen it with executive searches, before. I'll share a quick story with you. I watched my own brother, go to a firm, another firm wanted him. Within 2 weeks of him being there, they called him. 3 weeks after he'd left his first job, his salary had doubled. That's how much of a fight they got into over him. So you've got to be careful with that sort of thing, and I think we need to make a decision very quickly.
Mr. Chairman, this matrix may be very telling. I say we go ahead and get that out of the way, and that, it may be something we look at and say, you know, it's pretty obvious where we're going with it.
Mr. Chairman, one of the, I agree with that. I agree with everything everybody said, but if I'm not mistaken, didn't you tell them that we would report to them on Friday what we were going to do? Didn't we tell each candidate that?
I did, and we'll, you know, even if we choose to come back Saturday morning, that's what we'll report to them.
Does anyone need a refresher on the matrix? Are you good and realize that the
Mr. Duncan.
candidates below, are numbered, in the order that you saw them, not
Duncan, were you here for the
alphabetically this
matrix
time?
last time? Were you here for when?
Yes, he was. Yes. If you want to, work through that, I think we'll score it in the next room, and then y'all can do whatever you need to do in the interim. Is that all right? And how about if we start on this side this time?
Mr. Brown.
That's your choice, but yeah. Let's get at it.
All right, Bill, obviously, we've already handed out this matrix. And we all remember how this worked. We ranked these candidates, by comparing one against another, and then how many times did we choose a particular candidate, as we compared them to all the other candidates. We can see that, Mr. Phillips, had a cumulative score of 40 and Mr. Heath 30. So obviously Phillips was first in total points and Heath came in second. The one thing that Mr. Newman and Mr. Ray, we discussed in there, if you look at Dale Phillips, he was either the first or second for every member of this board. He either ranked number 1 or number 2 for every member of this board.
Meaning he either got a 4 or a 3.
He either
in
got
all
a 4 or
cases.
3, so he was your top choice or your number 2 choice. When it came to Mr. Heath, while he had lots of 4s and 3s, he also had, looked like a couple of 2s and some 1s, which means Mr. Heath, for 3 of the board members, ranked 3rd, and for 1 of the board members, he ranked 4th. I guess do what you want with that, but you know, one of the things about the forced matrix, what it does is it pretty much forces the board to look at consensus. So, Mr. Hale?
Mr. Long, let me make sure I heard you correctly. If we don't take a straw vote tonight, you're gonna call a special call meeting, bring us up here
Very
on
early.
Saturday morning for a vote that's binding.
Well, for a binding vote to do the same thing the straw poll will do.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, just wanna make sure that's clear.
Yeah, and let me
We're
explain
either
that.
gonna do it by straw poll tonight, or we're gonna do it by solid vote.
Well, let me,
on Saturday.
and let me explain that, Mr. Hale. Keep in mind that none of these people are hired until a contract is approved and signed. And so what the process is, if we all feel that the offer should be made, you know, if we go along with this matrix and we felt like the offer should be made to Mr. Phillips, basically what we're saying is, go to him and negotiate a contract and see if he's agreeable to the terms. And we have our board policy grants or has provisions for about 4 paragraphs of a recommended contract, and then we add to that contract from there. So, working with Ray and Associates, there would be a contract negotiated with him. Once us two, myself and Ray and Associates, got to an agreement with whoever it is we recommend, and we got to an agreement, that contract will come back to this board. If this board's not comfortable with the terms of that contract, they can reject it. There may be something this board says, no, I want that included in the contract, whatever it is. Then we would go back to that person. And if they refuse to agree to that, we could reject that candidate. And then we could go to the next candidate and we could start that process over. Mr. Wise?
Mr. Chairman, I've prayed about it. I've deliberated over it. I would like to make a motion that we prepare a contract to offer the position of Director of Schools of Sumner County, Tennessee to Dr. Dale Phillips III.
All right, I have a motion, a second. I'm going to remove the word motion and second out of that since this is not a voting session. But what I will do is we will take a straw poll. Mr. Wise, or Duncan, did you have something else before I head there? Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I did. Let me tell you, I haven't really prayed over this, but I will consider going ahead and doing this and praying over it. If it don't work out right, I hold the board responsible. No, I can't.
I understand. Just
I'll take that back.
As long
I'll
as you
take that
take it out
back.
on the two, sit on either side of it.
I'll take that back, but I mean, I don't want to hold up the process. I don't want to be one person to hold up the process, but you know, I'm still gonna give it a lot of thought.
Well, and I
that.
think we should, and that's why I was
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
stress the fact that until this board, by majority vote, approves a contract, we've not hired anyone. All we're talking about right now is making an offer, developing a contract, seeing if they're agreeable to terms of a contract, and if they agree, we agree, that'll be presented back to this board, and then it'll be up to all of us to make a decision. If that contract's acceptable, we would vote to approve it. If we needed changes, then we would go back to him and see if those changes were acceptable. Mr. Wise, do you have something else?
So the contract is contingent upon the approval of the majority vote of this board.
Absolutely. This board has to approve that contract.
Now, there's another thing that we need to think about, and I mentioned this in private conversation or semi-private conversation. having had relatives in the position of director of schools, I am aware that there are some director candidates that will not accept a position if it's not a unanimous or at least close to a unanimous vote of the board in support of that candidate. So that's another element of our thought process.
It is, and that's one of the things that, as I sat in there and talked with them about, that was very telling to me, was that Mr. Phillips was either the first or second choice of every member of this board. We had 5 people to choose from, and he was either number 1 or 2 of everyone. And Mr. Heath was either the 3rd or 4th for several board members. Mr. Hale?
I have 2 questions. I know this from the private sector. I'm not sure if it's any different in the public sector. I've never been through this process. Maybe only one of us here has before. How long does it typically take to get from a straw poll that we may take tonight to a contract to present back to this board? Is that typically a few days? And then I'll turn B is, from the time that you feel like you have something you can present to the board, will it be the chair's intention to immediately call a special called session at that time? In other words, will you call that meeting just as soon as, or is this something that, is that process as timely as what we're talking about?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'm thinking about. Obviously, everyone would need to check calendars, but if there is indication by this board to offer a contract, I don't know if we'd call him tonight, but we might. But I have no problem starting tomorrow morning working on that contract. Yeah, I have no problem starting tomorrow morning working on that contract. And if we get to an agreement on that, maybe Monday, something like that. Well, let me get Mr. Duncan, because he had his light. Mr. Gregory just raised his hand.
I think the last 2 times when we offered a contract, we had to make some changes in the contract. So it may be a possibility that this candidate would probably sit down and look at this contract and want to work some things out in that. Cause the last
As soon as we take this straw poll here in a moment, I'm going to ask for input from any of you if there's anything particular you'd want to see. Mr. Gregory?
On the part about getting out of a contract that you put in the contract, make it simple.
It will be. Mr. Hale?
I'd ask a question about what their experience is on the length of time. Is that a 2 or 3 day process? Is that a 2 or 3 week process?
It's either one or both. It kind of depends on what you offer and what they counter. And I think the things to think about, and I think you need to do the straw poll. I have a sheet here that depicts common contract offerings. I don't know that everybody has to kibitz on that tonight, but you need to be able to offer a basic kind of contract that would speak to the a lot of things like the insurance as well as the moving expenses and a number of things like that, not just the salary and the term of the contract. But we really encourage getting the thing done within a week, if you can.
All right, board, let's do this. I've asked Mr. Johnson to pull up the board's policy on director contract real quick. I'm just going to read it because it's really short. Let you know that is the starting point, and then we will talk about anything else we may want to see. Mr. Gregory's already mentioned the termination clause in it. But before we do that, let's just, and again, this is non-binding and it's not a vote. This is just a straw poll. Let's just see if the board is in agreement to start negotiations with Dale Phillips for director of schools. All that would be, again, this is just your own personal opinion. I got to be real careful with that. If you would be in favor of something like that, let me just see your hand. Okay, I've got a pretty good indication of how the board feels then. All right, Jeremy, do you have that pulled up. I did. That wasn't just for instructional purposes. I didn't raise it high. Mr. Duncan, do you have something else?
Jeremy, that's on board docs if you're looking for it.
You know, I can tell you in essence, I know one of the paragraphs in the standard board policy is a termination clause. That likely would be something, of an area for negotiation. I think the standard says 4 months. He may want something longer than 4 months. So it's those sorts of things. I'm sorry? Oh, you're printing it? I could have just looked at your computer.
We have just encountered, Mr. Chair, we've just encountered serious problems with a 4-month clause. Because the standard for the industry right now, believe it or not, is 18 months or the balance of the contract. And that may sound like an ominous number, and I'm not suggesting any number to you, but I'm telling you what the standard is in contracts. And we've stalled right now in negotiations for a very large district over that very issue, and the fact of due process for if you have anything in it that disallows due process, it's a deal breaker.
Well, let
nowadays.
me just read this. It's really, really short and simple.
Yes, sir.
And then, again, this is just a recommended contract that's contained in our policy manual. We don't have to do this, but this is the recommended language. The employer being us, the employee being the director. The employer hereby employs the employee, and the employee accepts employment as the director of schools for Sumner County, Tennessee, upon the terms and conditions herein contained. This agreement shall supplant and supersede by agreement any statutory provisions or rules of laws which the party have the power to alter. So that's just legal language. The employer shall pay the employee during the duration of this contract an annual salary of, you negotiate the amount in there, effective date. The employee's salary shall increase in the same percentage as the teacher's salary increase from time to time. Paragraph 3, employee agrees to devote substantially employee's entire time and energies to the affairs of the employer's business and shall perform such services as defined by Tennessee law for director of schools. And I'm fairly certain that is lifted straight out of Tennessee code. The term of this agreement shall commence on approval by the employer. The term shall end on, and you fill in a date, provided either party may terminate this agreement on 4 months' notice or upon such shorter notice as the parties may agree. The employee shall receive vacation, sick leave, medical insurance, and other benefits normally furnished to other administrative employees of the employer. The employee shall take 10 days vacation each year. The employee shall receive 20 vacation days per year. The employee may accumulate vacation days in excess of the mandatory 10 days. So those are things that we can change or alter if we choose to. That's just suggested language. We've heard them say that the 4-month may be an issue. If we're asking someone to relocate from another state here, I can see why. They might not want to come up here, and a month from now we decide this didn't work and send them packing. So, I can understand that concern, but I believe we can probably get to some agreeable terms. If there's anything else that anyone would specifically want in the contract, I know, Mr. Gregory, the last contract negotiation we had, you had some things that you thought should be included in a contract with regards to student performance, just language that, increase and that sort of thing. I don't recall that it had specific numbers or anything, but just that they shall, work towards student improvement and that sort of thing, just general type language such as that. So if anyone has any suggestions, and you don't have to give them to me right now, if you just want to think about that, send them to Mr. Johnson. I'll have him send them to me, and we'll get started on this. It's written on a napkin somewhere. I said, you've got it written on a napkin or an envelope somewhere, I trust, on the sole of your shoe. All right. All right, everybody knows where we're at, where we're going. We'll get started. If we can get something hammered out in the next day or two, we may shoot for Monday. Mr. Gregory? How am I gonna collect my thoughts? Probably in a rambling manner, the way I normally talk to the press, but I'm not sure.
I would suggest that at this point you say that the board has identified a lead candidate. That way you have not converged on a vote.
I suspect I won't make any commitments to the media.
That you've
They're gonna,
that you've
they're
identified.
gonna
a lead.
write whatever they want, so.
Certainly.
Yeah, she's
I would
already
like to
tweeted
speak
it.
before the board regarding, you know, the term of the contract. I don't know what your law is in this state. Is it mandatory 3 years or not more than 4 or whatever it is?
It's mandatory no more than 4.
Okay. Normally, they're gonna wanna come for 3 or 4 years, and if you put in a 4-month buyout, you're effectively giving them a 4-month contract.
Well, you know,
So that's something that you're gonna have to be aware of, and I tell you where it'll get hung up, Don, if we're not careful, and I just wanna apprise you before the board. This is, Mr. Phillips will probably, or Dr. Phillips will probably consult his attorney to look at the contract. If they see a 4-year buyout, it's a red flag.
Well,
I mean, a
no,
4-month, I'm
I
sorry.
will say this, his response to question 4 that you sent him, what is your current contract status? Are you under a multi-year contract at the present time? And if so, what year of the multi-contract are you in? You must answer it. His response was, he has a standard 1-year contract going forward for the school year. So he's apparently accustomed to 1-year contracts.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I would say that if I were in Mississippi and well-established, I wouldn't come here for less than the maximum contract of 4 years.
Well, no,
So I understand where they're coming from. I mean, it'd be one thing if you're already here and you're renegotiating a contract and things have not been going so well, but to pick up your family and move across the country, I mean, it would be something I'd be looking for too, so I know exactly what you're saying.
and I will say this, it likely would be a 4-year contract since that's what Tennessee law allows. Bear in mind, those notice clauses are not only for this board, they're also for that employee. Because if they were to come somewhere and they're contractually obligated to stay, and the board chose not to release someone from their contract, they are contracted with us to perform that service. So it actually is for protection of both parties. But I know what you're saying, and obviously we're gonna have to take that under account. All right, I guess that's it. It's 10 o'clock. We've been here for 9 hours. 3-hour school board meeting in the future is going to seem relatively short.
Mr. Chair, I know you're all ready and willing and to get out the door, but I want to thank you all for your dedication and following the process, because I tell you, in our opinion, it's a good process, and when you follow it, you come to a happy ending. So let's bear on thinking that we're going to get our top
And
candidate.
I want to thank you guys. I think you brought us some excellent candidates. I appreciate the caliber
Thank
and the
you.
process as well.
I would second that as well.
Thank you. Didn't like what?
Yeah, I'm going to take it. Yeah, I was actually going to take it.
Oh, yeah, we want,
What happened
we
to
want,
that? What happened to that?
you guys could be filling that in.